Hi, I'm Joseph Kalichstein of the Kalichstein-Laredo-Robinson Trio. I thought I'll talk to you a little bit about one of our favorite things to do as a trio, which we have done over the last 40 years and will continue doing it because it is an incredible journey into the psyche and mind of one of the greatest geniuses of all, Beethoven. I know you're groaning, Beethoven again. What can you say about Beethoven that hasn't been said? Well, you'll be surprised. It's not so much what can be said, but what can be thought of and felt. As performers, we constantly find new things. But no matter how many times we played these pieces, new things come up and new things to wonder at. The thing that I would particularly like to talk about is the cycle of all the Beethoven trios. He has played the piano all his life until he became so deaf that he couldn't play anymore. That was about 1812, 1813, which means that for the last 12 years of his life or 15 years of his life, he couldn't play anymore, so he stopped writing piano trios. And that's why he went to the string quartet, which is kind of, for him, was much more abstract. But as long as he was active as a performer, he loved writing piano trios just as much as piano sonatas. So we can really go his entire creative life from the beginning, actually from the very first published pieces, Opus 1, when he was 25, to 1812, 1813, when he wrote the Archduke Trio, and he finished writing that piece, that schizoid piece that's called the Variations on Ich bin der Schneider Kakadu, which was a silly little tune from an operetta that he started writing when he was very young, and then just at the end of his creative life, he added an incredible opening and incredible ending. He did it around the same time that he wrote the Ninth Symphony. So the opus number of this one, by the way, is 121A, which is just very, very late. So in a sense, it's his earliest trio and his latest trio. That's why I called it schizoid. And one of the things that's incredible about him, one of the thousands of things that's incredible about him, is that he never did anything twice. So if you look at those the Opus 1 trios, the three trios, they're so different from each other. They were written at the same time. The third one is dramatic and powerful and full of struggle, typical C minor. That was, by the way, the trio that Haydn discouraged him from publishing. That was 1795 when Beethoven was 25. Just arrived in Vienna as this big shot virtuoso pianist. And Haydn told him that the Viennese audience is not ready for this kind of explosion. Beethoven, of course, ignored the advice. And the interesting thing, by the way, about that meeting is that we don't know what Haydn thought of Beethoven's ignoring it, but we do know is that all the trios that Haydn wrote right after that meeting kind of kicked it up a notch. And it was wonderful to see the result of that little friendly competition, making Haydn go deeper and more inventive, which is saying quite a bit because he was inventive to begin with. Anyway, back to Beethoven. So those three trios that were written at the same time are very different from each other, even in the same piece, like Opus 1 number 2, the G major, which is not played that often, God knows why. It's very lighthearted, except for the slow movement, which is an amazingly deep and profound and felt and expressive and romantic piece. So then there's Opus 70, the two trios that again were written at the same time. The second one is his most lyrical, most Schubertian, friendly, optimistic piece. And it was written at the same time of the Opus 70 number 1, which is nicknamed The Ghost, because of this eerie, frightening slow movement and the two fast movements sandwiching that ghost in the middle are full of so much energy that you really have to be in a nuclear shelter to not to be exposed to this violent but optimistic. It's a funny combination. Explosion. There are a few other trios that one can talk about. I talked already a little bit about the Ich bin der Schneider Kakadu. I mean, even the title is silly. I'm the tailor Kakadu. Beethoven loved to take silly themes of other people and show off how he could make interesting variations on them. And what he does by adding that incredibly powerful and serious and profound and expressive opening, it juxtaposes two completely different worlds, and he had no trouble with doing that. He did it, for instance, by the way, in the second piano concerto, which was really his first. Let's not go into that. He added many years later a cadenza that has nothing to do with the piece except for the themes, but you hear the 30 odd years that have passed between the original and the cadenza, and he had no problem juxtaposing that. He loved contrast. He loved to shock the audience. Going back to the fact that he was constantly revolutionizing things. Haydn was right. Opus 1 number 3, the C minor, is a revolution in terms of what an audience can expect. But many other things were revolutionary. Even a very innocent trio, Opus 11, that was originally written for clarinet, not for a violin. All of a sudden, the cello, which used to be in Haydn and in Mozart kind of a support for the left hand of the piano, the cello becomes the main story. And it was like Beethoven discovered, all of a sudden, the incredibly warm and singing quality of the cello, and thereby changing the history of Western music from then on. Because from then on, if you look at Beethoven himself and Brahms, etc., the cello, of course, is as prominent as can be, and it's always has these incredible warm and expressive tunes. So he did it even in one little innocent piece. The only other two pieces I'd like to talk about are from the last years of writing piano trios, which was 1812, 1813. The famous one is, of course, the Archduke, it was dedicated to Archduke Rudolph, and that's why the nickname. Many other great pieces were dedicated to Rudolph. And the other piece from the same year, by contrast, was a little Allegretto, which was published only after his death. And the reason that's important and touching is that that was a teaching piece for the 9-year-old daughter of a very close friend of his, which many biographers think was his immortal beloved, either secret or not so secret lover. And he taught her daughter. So to see that, to get a picture of this cantankerous, difficult, rude, angry, he wasn't an old man, but he thought of himself as an old man. He was not even 50. And writing this delicate piece for this student with a lot of love, with fingerings, with very meticulous phrase markings and touch markings. And yet, even though it's innocent and it's easy to play because she was 9 years old, it has all of his trademarks. The sudden shifts, the wrong accents, you put an accent on the wrong part of the beat, the lyricism juxtaposing the sudden, as I said, the sudden shifts, but in dynamics and in mood. And it's very touching because you feel the love he had for that little girl. And by the way, 10 years later, he dedicated to that same little girl, who was by then 19, for me, his greatest piano sonata, Opus 109 in E major. And at the same year, he wrote the Archduke. And the Archduke is basically a huge version of the same little piece. It has the lyricism, it has the breadth, it has the Brahmsian arches, it has the wrong accent, it has the humor, it has the inner peace, it has a set of variation, which is one of his most expressive ones. It has a peasanty last movement. It has it all. I don't think anybody has been more complete.